Today my guest is Randy Pagels of Microsoft. Randy, how are you, sir?
Excellent, thank you, Dave.
Hey, what do you do?
I am a developer technology specialist for Microsoft. I specialize in Visual Studio and help customers see the value of our application lifecycle management tools.
Let's continue a conversation we were having earlier today about testing. I'm a big fan of testing, and we've done shows here about automated testing, mostly focused on things like unit testing and integration testing. But as we were talking, there's more to testing than just all these automated tests that you do as part of your continuous integration.
Right.
It helps to have a human being pound on your code a little bit, right?
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Describe that process a little bit.
You're going to want some human interaction with your application because they have a different eye than an automated test, or the automated test might have some validation that you can only get perhaps if you have somebody personalized and testing it, right? Visually see something's wrong. So you want to do manual tests. You generally speaking, there's about 70-80% of all testing is done manually.
Really?
It is. Manual testers will follow scripts. They usually store them in Excel. One of the more popular testing tools is Excel.
Or Word.
Or Word. They keep track of their tests that way.
Yep.
So yeah, that's what we're kind of looking towards the customers to capture that piece of it. Yeah.
I've been on a lot of large projects where there's a formal, this is a waterfall project where we get done with our development phase. Then we kind of throw it over the wall to the testers, and they have these Word documents with their use cases on them, and from that they create test plans. Yeah. And this, step one, click this button. Step two, click that button. Is that a good way to go about a unit test? A user test.
A user test, yeah, a user acceptance test. Generally speaking, that's exactly how they are. They're broken down in steps, and they're nothing more than what you just described. You step one, do this, and step two, do that, and then you record that. Now, it gets more complex if you're testing that same script across multiple environment configurations.
Yep.
Let's say you're testing Vista with IE7 and IE8 and IE9, and you need to move over to Windows 7 and do the same thing. There's 6 tests, technically. But anyway.
One of the things that lacks, in my opinion, is that it always tests the same order of steps. And what I've discovered is sometimes if I give my application to somebody, sometimes it goes into production, and the first thing they do is something totally unexpected. I never thought that they would right-click here and open a new browser.
Right.
I never thought that they would they do something that's totally unexpected. Yeah. And if you're running a script every time, you can't catch that. Somebody's got to sort of randomly bang on it.
So you could, we have what you're talking about is exploratory testing, basically.
Okay. I didn't know there was a name for it. I feel better now.
I think there's a name for it. Exploratory testing. So the testing product we're talking about is Test Professional 2010, right?
That's the Microsoft's tool that can help you with this testing.
Microsoft's tool. It's a manual test case management tool. It's new to the Visual Studio family. It's really it focuses on creating test plans, creating test cases, and then editing and executing these test cases. Now, one of the cool things you can do is exploratory testing, meaning you have one step. You have to kind of prime the pump, right? So you have one step that just says, load the application and start working on it, hacking on it, as you'd say, and right-click on that button and see what happens. Well, the cool thing about the product is it will record in what we call an action log. It records those clicks. So if later you want to play those back, we call it fast forward for manual testing. So it allows you to play those steps back, because you may not remember a week later that you actually clicked that or right-clicked on that and it broke.
Right.
So point is, you can take that action log and generate a brand new test case from it with all the steps spelled out for you.
I've seen that. That's a very cool tool. So this gets around the idea that I try to recreate. You found a bug in my application, and I try to recreate it, and I cannot recreate it because in order to recreate it, I've got to click these buttons in this exact order. I have to click this and then right-click that and then close this window, and then the bug manifests itself.
Right.
Now there's no ambiguity. I can just play back the steps that.
You can play those back. If they found that bug, you can play those back. You can actually see the steps. It'll actually peel out each step for you and break it apart, and then store that as a brand new test case. Now you can, from that point, you can automate it. You can run it. You could verify a bug from it. Let's say that bug gets fixed. A week later, you've often done something else. You forgot you filed it, but a week later it comes back from the development team or in a next build, let's say. You could simply right-click and say, "Hey, run this once exploratory test."
Right.
Fast forward through it, make sure it still works. Make sure that right-clicking is fixed. So that's just an example, but that would work. Yeah.
Let's go through a more specific example. I mean, if I want a team that's building an application, and we've done all of our unit testing, we've done our unit integration testing, kind of the things that developers do, and I want to now move this into user testing, some manual user testing. How can I use Visual Studio Test? What's it called?
Test Professional.
Test Professional. How can I use that tool to help me?
So Visual Studio Test Professional will allow you to, and by the way, so let me back up here. So
Yeah.
Test Professional 2010 is a WPF-based application, so it's a Windows Presentation Foundation application. It's built from the ground up. It's really geared towards manual testers, right? We have Visual Studio for our developers. We have the Test Professional for the manual testers, right? Again, I mentioned 70% of all testing is done manually.
Yep.
There really wasn't a tool besides Excel and Word
Right.
to help the manual testers. So what they can do is create these test plans. They can adjust some settings for the test plans, adjust at which build they're going to be testing, fill out a test matrix, create it however they like, hang a bunch of test cases off it.
Test matrix is what?
The test matrix is really the maybe the combinations of operating systems and browsers or desktops they want to test. In the testing world, it's called a test matrix.
Right.
It allows them to check off the box of these different areas that they recorded. So the test case management tool allows you to create a static, let's say, test plan. You could create query-based suites of tests. Basically, they're collections of tests. Meaning, hey, run a query that says, bring back all the test cases that might have a priority equal to 1. Show me what those are so I can start testing them.
Okay.
Or show me all the requirements in the system that don't have any test cases at all, and I can start adding test cases to it.
Okay.
So that's what this tool allows me to do. So as a business analyst, you can say, well, I have all these requirements. How do I know if they're tested? You can use the tool to run queries against the data to find that out. That's one way. So the other way is to create the test cases and put them into the system, and then go ahead and start running them, executing the test cases.
Okay, so either if I'm a one-man shop, then I'm going to enter those test cases myself, or if I'm a part of a larger team that has its own test team, the test team is going to be responsible for entering the tests into this system, and it comes time for them to execute the test. What does that look like to them? They open up this testing tool and do what?
Yeah, so in the testing tool, there's a couple key areas. There's one for the testing center, which is where we're going to create the testing plans, create the suites, generate and create these test cases, and then there's another tab called the testing.
Okay.
So generally speaking, testers would come in and they would go to that tab, and it would present a list of tests that need to be executed.
Okay.
When they click run, it kind of morphs Test Professional into what we call Test Manager. Now, Test Manager will dock itself to one of the side of the screen, allowing the rest of the screen and all its real estate to be used for whatever application you're going to be testing.
Okay.
Now, what's kind of cool about Test Manager is it loads the test case, presents the steps one by one.
All right.
Idea is you manually pass and fail each step. There's some checkpoints you can put in your test case to say, stop here, visually validate whatever you're checking on the screen is correct, right? We call it a checkpoint.
So there's a distinction between this is an action they want the tester to perform, and this is something they want the tester to look at and verify.
Exactly. And then whether it's dozens of steps long, however long it is, it's that simple. You pass and fail the steps. You stop at the checkpoints. You end the iteration. The other thing we support in test cases is parameters. So you can have parameterized values in the test case to say, let's say you're entering checkout information, for instance. Make sure you enter a different visa number, a different expiration date number, or a different user, whatever that is.
Okay.
Same test case, different data drives it differently.
Okay.
At the end, you run through all the iterations of data, you pass and fail the entire test, and that's it.
Okay.
So.
And then that gets sent. Where does that get stored? How does it get shared back to the developer?
Yep. So all that information gets stored in the test cases themselves. Live inside a Team Foundation server.
All right.
And Team Foundation Server now supports the idea of a test case, right? And also what we call a rich bug. I have to kind of talk about the rich bug, right?
Do it. Talk about the let's one more question. Is TFS required in order to use this testing tool?
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent question. So TFS 2010 is required.
Okay.
It has to
be 2010.
It absolutely is needed to be used with Test Professional because of it's the way test cases are defined, the way the new structure of the work items are defined, and things around like the bug templates, for instance, has changed.
Okay, and is Visual Studio required?
Visual Studio is not required at that point. You do need Team Foundation Server and Test Professional in the testing world only.
Okay.
We'll get to that in a second.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have to go ahead and tell
So, one of the key features and powerful features of the test runner, and the whole idea is a tester will go through manual steps. If there's no problem, then that's great. There's no problem. If they find a bug, a very powerful feature of the test runner is to allow you to for a tester to simply file the bug. Mm-hmm. They pretty much fail the step. They say create a bug, a rich bug. They can do a screen capture. Mm-hmm. They can do a video recording of the actual bug itself, so it's as if a developer is, let's say, looking over the shoulder of a tester. They get that whole video recording of the screen. Mm-hmm. The action log, so in other words, the steps that are actually clicked, all the different fields that are filled out is attached automatically to the bug. Mm-hmm. The build that was being tested, the code that was being tested, the system information that was that the tester was on at the time they found the bug in the first place. All that information is packaged up and saved in a bug and saved in Team Foundation server for a developer to come in and, in their queue they'll get a bug they need to work on and they'll have all this rich information attached.
This addresses the works on my machine excuse that I've used many times.
Exactly.
You don't get that ping pong back and forth so much. Yep. I tried it. It works fine here. Well, did you try it on Windows XP? Did you try it with IE6? These are all variables that I might not take into account. Did you try it with only 1 gigabyte of RAM?
So all these things. Let me address that one thing about the works on my machine. So one of the dev test ping pong effect here is a tester would file a bug, and a developer would not be able to reproduce that bug very easily. And yes, works on my machine.
They'd close
the bug, non-reproducible, frustrates the testers. They have to go back to the drawing board, gather more information, stop what they're doing, and it goes back and forth.
Right.
We call that a dev test ping pong, right? One of another groundbreaking technologies that's inside of Visual Studio, that's also part of a collection piece inside of Test Professional is what we call IntelliTrace. So IntelliTrace is this concept of historical debugging. Think of it as TiVo, a black box flight recorder for your application. Tester doesn't even need to know it's on. They're testing the application, they file a bug, the IntelliTrace log is attached to this bug automatically, keeping track of every method and every event in the application as it was being executed, and package it up nicely and attach it to the bug for the developer. What's really cool now, the developer opens that up, no more of this work on my machine. They have the actual debug log of what went wrong and pinpoint the bug right then and there, one time, not back and forth. So that's just, we call it, I like to say it as it's going to change the debugging mode in the 21st century of debugging. It's just a revolutionary.
Oh, I agree. And I think too often in organizations, developers and testers see themselves as adversaries. And they shouldn't be. They're really working towards the same goal. And as a developer, a good tester is valuable to me because if he finds bugs in my code, that is 1,000 times better than end users finding bugs in my code.
Correct.
Because the end users are the enemy. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
the point is that we're allies.
Right.
We should be. And if we're doing this ping pong, some resentment can occur. Why aren't you providing the information I need? Or why are you opening bugs that don't that aren't reproducible? And he's like, well, why aren't you fixing the bugs that I found?
Yeah. One of the excellent point. One of the things that used to be there was this wall between developers and testers.
Yeah.
So this tool we plan on having the developers and testers now collaborate much better, right? Break the walls down, get them on the same page. Because let's face it, if the application goes out the door with bugs in it, it looks bad on everybody. You either win together or you lose together,
Absolutely.
Right? So developers should be testing their own code. Testers can go ahead and start testing their code. And the more value they can add to the bug to provide to the developer to fix it one time saves the developer cycle, saves the tester's cycle, and it's a win-win situation for everybody.
Agreed.
So that's how this scenario could work out in the perfect world, right?
So that sounds great that testers are finding bugs more quickly, they're communicating better with the developers, and so the developers are able to fix them a lot faster. What about the fact that while the testers are testing, the developers are working on the next release, the next iteration, or the next sprint? A tester is going to be testing version 1.3. The developer might be on version 1.4 or 1.5. How do you reconcile that? Does the tool help that at all?
Yes. So Test Professional is, again, the concept of test plans. And test plans usually are associated with an iteration of development. Call it 1.3, 1.4, 1.5.
Right.
So you assign a test plan with all its test cases to a specific version of the software being developed. And yes, developers are down the road already, right?
Right, so they're working on different source code now.
Yeah. And the idea there is that the test plan is associated with a specific build that came out of Team Foundation Server.
Yeah.
So any tests that get, or any bugs that get filed or tests get associated with that build. Now, let's say you move on to the next build and so forth. The idea is you'll change that information in the test professional and kind of change your energies towards testing this new version.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happens to the old test cases that are golden that you want to make sure work all the time? Generally speaking, what you can do is use those for regression tests.
Right.
So we can automate those tests. So let me just talk about automation for a second.
Yeah.
So you have the manual tests, right? I told about test runner. You run these manual tests. They're nothing more than test cases. The idea is to take a test case now and you give it to a skilled developer with some coding skills that inside of Visual Studio Premium and pull that test case in and convert it to some C# or VB.NET code. Now what's kind of nice is it's compiled. You can add some validation to it and then hook it into your build process to always run these tests at build, which is really nice now because all the manual tests that you find, the golden manual tests that you want to make sure work going forward, are automated in part of the build process.
Nice.
So they're always going to work.
So what's going to happen is that if I have, let's say I have a daily build that occurs at 2 a.m., and I'm going to run not only all my unit tests and all my integration tests, but I'm also going to run these automated tests that are based on manual testing. Is that going to essentially launch my application? If I'm standing there watching the screen, are we going to see a mouse moving around and clicking things?
It absolutely will. You'll need the build process will need an interactive logon so that it can run these.
Okay.
And basically it does control your mouse and keyboard, and it's as if someone's sitting there running this application.
Okay.
So it's performing all the mouse clicks, all the data entry points, and start and stopping of the app.
So there have been third-party tools in the past that have helped with that, but some of them are kind of difficult to configure. And if you can record something and turn it into C# code, that's a big plus.
That's a big plus. So let's just continue that thought for a second. So recording a manual test,
Mm-hmm.
which was previously test steps that had an action log, can be converted. Another option we call them the coded UI testing is what I'm talking about here.
Okay.
So coded UI test is the name of this automated testing piece.
Okay.
You can actually just start that up, click record, and record an application from scratch. So if you're a developer and you don't have a manual test or an exploratory test to convert, you can simply say record, start running through the application, and have it recorded automatically right then and there, and then still generate C# VB.NET code.
Typically that's the hardest part of the application to test, or at least to automate it anyway.
Yeah, so we made automation very, very simple. Just record what's going on and save it.
You still have the issue of the UI might change. The UI is probably the most likely thing to change in an application. And just renaming a button or moving, getting rid of a text box somewhere breaks all of your UI tests. You have to go back in and modify them. But if it's C# code, I think that just eases that pain a little bit.
It does. It does. Now, depending on, generally speaking, the cycle for automating a test would be after the application has settled down a little bit, right?
Okay.
Has become more stable.
Right.
You're not adding a lot of fields. You're not deleting a lot of fields.
Yeah.
The recording piece, the action log, isn't that brittle. If you want to move fields around the screen, that's okay.
Yep.
Obviously, if you delete fields, that will break it up to re-record. So we made it very simple to re-record that script, re-record that action log, so you can continue to fast forward for manual testing, right?
Okay.
That's the idea. You'll convert it to an automated test after the screen is mature to the point where you're not making a lot of different field changes. That's the concept. And generally speaking, automated test lags behind an iteration or two of the developer's
Like the unit test, the integration tests, and the development.
Yes, the cycle of the development. Usually they're ahead by a cycle or two of the testing.
Okay.
So you wouldn't want to automate tests right away anyway.
Okay, it's not like the unit testing. I like to write unit tests while I'm writing the code. Some people like to write unit tests before they write the code.
Sure, either way.
It's a different paradigm with what you're talking about.
It really
UI
is.
Tests.
It's
wait
more
until it's stable.
wait till it's stable to run automated tests going forward. Because of the stable piece of the application, you want to make sure it always works, that some new code being checked in doesn't break something you already had.
Right.
And yes, unit tests are fine. They're the first generation of testing, so if you will, that developers could write towards their own code. Those get checked in. Those are a different kind of automated tests, right?
Okay. Where do people go for more information?
Where you can go for more information is very simple. You go to Microsoft.com/vStudio, Visual Studio, and there'll be the different lineup there. You'll have the Visual Studio editions plus the Test Professional edition. There's also a thing called Lab Management edition, which we'll save for another time.
Okay.
So that's
and you have your blog still. That's still staying Team System Cafe.
Teams. Yep. You can also go to teamsystemcafe.net for lots of information around Visual Studio Almost said Team System. Visual
Yeah,
Studio
the
Test
artist
Professional.
formerly known as.
Formerly known as Team System. It's hard to drop that.
But all the team tools that are in Visual
Yeah.
Studio now are in the affiliated product, like the Test Manager.
Test Manager, right? What?
Anything else?
I think that's it for now. I would like to I thank you very much for the time today. It was a
Thank
great,
you.
good conversation,
Yeah,
Dave.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I have many friends that I love to share the information on the technology that I use and the technology that I talk about.